everybody. My name is Michael Cook. I am a digital security analyst, network security, applications developer, etc., etc. What I'm about to show for you or exhibit is a project that I've been working on for some time here. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up. So this is my server. I'll go ahead and launch this program that I've been building. So I have both a server script and a client script. I was trying to zipper them together, but they have different processes involved. So for the time being, they're separate. But anyway, this is available on GitHub. I will post a link to that script, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up the MDT tool. And I'm going to go ahead and delete everything in MDT. Okay. Now I'm going to launch this a couple times so you see what it does. Well, this will probably be the one time, well, I'll open up MDT again momentarily. The reason I'm doing this is because I want people to see that I'm not faking what happens here. This all happens on the fly. All right, so properties. So here's all my standard rules and stuff. It is generating an ISO. It does have them monitoring enabled. Hit OK there. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the deployment share. And then I'm also going to totally bomb that folder. All right, so now this is where my script is going to, and you'll see that in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and open a new deployment share. Actually, no. I still have yet to automate the process of pulling the whole, like basically installing my modification into the folder, but you can pretty much put this folder wherever you want. I just wanted people to see that I am generating a brand new folder with all the contents that need to be there. So it's going to put all of those files there. That's the process that I've yet to get to, but that's easy. A lot easier than what I've done so far. All right, so now I go into here. For whatever reason, it still knows some stuff from the registry. All of these things are saved in the registry, so unless I uninstalled MDT, then that wouldn't be there. But as you can see, that's today's date, and I'll show you the process that basically uses this folder that I've built. And make sure that the share is I don't normally give that full control, but not a big deal. All right, so now I'm ready to start this process. Here we go. So, I mean, I know the GUI doesn't look all that like spectacular at the moment, but I will be adding some tabs for the stuff in the client and the server scripts. So you'll be able to deploy everything from basically this, and you'll be able to do it from PXE. That'll include your drivers, your certificates, your applications, and basically your share settings or certificates. I'm not sure if I said that. But you'll also be able to do your imaging from this too. Be able to do updates and whatnot. But as far as all of this is concerned, this is the company name. That's the share that you just saw me make. This is the host name of this computer. This is the deployment account name, the administrator account, basically the parent admin. This is where I need to add in the password. And then this is the website, phone number, hours, OEM logo. All four of these things go in your system control panel on all of the images you distribute. As far as the OEM background, I'm not entirely sure why, but it won't push unless it's activated a copy of Windows. I did have it working. I'm not gonna go through and try to figure out why that's not working, but that's literally in the right spot where it needs to go. The OEM branch, so like if you want your certificates to be allocated correctly, you might use that. This is your domain name or your DNS domain, user profile domain or user DNS domain. I could pull out those variables, but I want to make this as short as possible. And then this right here is basically the administrator account name for all your child items. This would be your MDT servers, your entire network or domain controllers. This is the account that you use to initially access the system. And this right here is the password that you would need to complete a deployment. So with this account right here will set up a post process to configure the device. Using sysprep and unattend XML, I mean, you can continue to do it that way if you want to like waste time and money. But this process right here actually does all of the same things just by targeting the variables from the child item. And when you set up the control scripts properly, it achieves the same end result in less time. So that's what those are for. As far as the proxy host, I haven't really fully developed the proxy host, but I do have a local proxy that I'm using in addition to the API to Chocolatey. Chocolatey is a business, well, Chocolatey is a public community and a business service platform that automatically provides the latest applications and things of that nature for various things that you would want on your system. For example, Rufus. If you want to burn flash drives, you could use that. That's an open source tool. Or 7-zip. That's what Chocolatey uses to basically distribute its packages. There are some upsides and downsides of Chocolatey, but I'm not going to get into that. I have basically developed a way to automatically internalize those applications that you would want on your network or your clients' machines. And then this, if you're using a domain, you would want to use the NetBIOS ID. If you're using a work group, then you're going to want to use the system machine name. So like, for instance, that right there. And then also, this is the folder that I just made for the deployment share. But anyway, here we go. I'm going to hit start here. Oh, wonderful. That's not supposed to happen. Well, obviously, there's some growing pains here, but yeah, let's go ahead and I just added that feature recently, so I'm going to go ahead and restart the script. And I'm going to choose the method that I have thoroughly tested. I mean, it's cool if you want to laugh about that, but when you implement new features into your software, that's where you have to test and validate everything. So as you can see, all of these press enter continues. It's checking child item folders. Basically, that's my company name. That's the first tab, that GUI I just showed you. That's the folder, the R16 folder. If you're not on this machine, it will use a network name instead. If you're not on this machine, then you could use SIM to basically access this, and this will say the network path instead of that. But that still has to be developed as there's other complications involved rather than just remoting it, which is what I'm doing right now. Press enter and continue. Now it's sending over my server image, which it was just making a comparison of. And then it will process the client images that I have. I'm working on making it switchable so that if you just want to have one image, then that's all you need. But for the most part, I programmed it so that it'll use all 7 images that I use, which are the one server 2016, and then Windows 10, home, education, and professional, which is technically the same thing as enterprise. Both x86 and 64-bit. And as you'll see here, you'll get status updates of all the images that DISM is processing. So what this is doing is it's basically concatenating all of the images that you would use into a single target image. Now, I do know that the build number is not the most up to date. I'm not entirely sure why, but this .86 number here, it's what shows up when I use my tool to see the version, and DISM reports that. But once you fully install this, it will show you. It'll show you that it's on version like 1.16 or something. So you'll get this switch here if you want to do a full or fast or compress. If you've changed the boot images, you have to use this, because if you do anything with your bootstrap INI file, which I just did, you're going to want to use full. But I just added these other features here to reflect, like at some point I'll have switching for the root variable INI file. So what that process that you just saw did was it looked for anything that was in MDT and it removed it. It basically looked for child items, and pulled the version information from the image, the images that you saw, and then it made server and client child folders within a PowerShell provider, and it didn't exist until I activated it. That's basically what made this whole process so challenging, was that being able to decide whether to use a PS path or basically the drive path was something I didn't quite understand. Basically, when you utilize the file system and it shows you C drive, like when it shows you this right here, C drive, security control, custom settings, INI, what's not shown or told to you is that there's like a whole 20 or 20 plus characters before that. It could be even like 30 or 40 that say like file system, PowerShell provider, da 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 da. When you're trying to do stuff with pathing and .NET and etc., it can be pretty complicated. Yeah, it can be rather complicated to try to manage everything by using like split path, join path, this, that, the other thing. But when you use arrays and mathematics, like addition and subtraction and hash tables and arrays, well, you basically can use what's called for each object, or you can use basic for loops with a token to do the same command over and over for whatever the token or delimiter is. Now, I'm going to go ahead. I probably should have just hit full so it does that. At some point, I'm going to re-engineer the WinPE process because this is slow. I know unattend on Excel, unattend.xml and sysprep are just as slow, if not a whole lot slower. But I'll tell you one thing. This process could be exponentially faster. Like it could have been done like seconds after I hit the full button, which is sort of what the fast button on that switch would do, but it doesn't actually change anything in the boot image. So the problem is this. Microsoft has an imaging process that wants to make sure that the image can't easily be amended, which that doesn't stop you from being able to amend security principles and things within an ISO after you've installed it. But what it does mean is that if you're attempting to make changes to an ISO or distribute it and it doesn't have the same hash code, then it basically renders the file pointless. So there are some modifications I had to make to MDT in general to be able to utilize the templates that I use so that it would actually legitimately install and deploy my target operating systems. But you know, if any applications engineer wants to review my code, they'll see exactly how I did it. Not that that's really the most challenging part. That wasn't the most challenging part about all this. The most challenging part about all of this was basically making sure that the whole process that you're seeing here works from beginning to end. And obviously it started like horribly with errors and stuff because I just implemented a new feature at the beginning so that, you know, if you change your password or whatever, which at some point I'll have more controls that check with Active Directory if the password is correct. But that requires research into additional modules that were developed by the community, and et cetera, et cetera. At this time, though, as long as I know my account password and the account name, this process will inject those items into this image here. And then also, like you'll see, secured digits plus LLC resources OEM-BG. So that field where I entered in the background is right there. So that background will be in your deployment image. Also, there are a couple of graphics that I've modified in the deployment share that you know, customize it a little bit. But at some point, I'm going to be getting around to the naked PowerShell delivery script, which I have been in contact with Michael Nyhouse from Microsoft. I'm sure he thinks not the best things of me. I have vented some of my frustrations and challenges with him, and for all intents and purposes, I'm not entirely sure what he thinks of me. He may just think that, who knows? But anyway, there are a couple of people that I've learned a great deal of things from. They're all on the community out there. Gary Ewan Park, very limited amount of help from him, but he has been rather helpful. Shane Young from Bold Zebras. And the one guy that basically kind of made me really deeply think about all this was Damien Van Robes. He's a French guy, and he's pretty good. He's from a website called Assist and Deploy. He's got some pretty slick manners and methods, but you know, sometimes I will take a look at his code just to see what I'm doing wrong. And you know, I think that there's an experiential overlap that these program engineers and etc. seem to believe in when developing applications that work correctly or well. I can tell you that I've only been doing this for about 5 months, but I have known how to make websites and CSS and basic batch file processing or scripting and graphics editing. I have formal training of all that stuff, as well as group policy object editing, security policies, certificates, Active Directory, domain configuration and controller, Windows deployment server. I have only really been doing stuff with for the past 3 or 4 years, and then a Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. I knew that existed about a decade ago. But anyway, the WinPE is done building the process. What it's doing now is it's sending the image that it just made right into WDS. So like you don't have to open up your deployment share or WDS. It's just going to update the file, and it will report that. See right there. So as you can see, 125.03. It's 125 right now. So that just happened, and that's all the information there. MDT and WinPE will automatically dump out what's called a light touch or LTI, whatever. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a light touch image, and that's what it will report in PXE. I don't want to close this. I want to keep it open. But as you can see, that process has completed, so I'm going to show you the client side now. And now, because I want people to see the variables I'm putting into the system, I could very easily use something like Power CLI or the virtual machine, the VM. I can't remember the guy's name. Something Cars made a module for VMware that can control. Like if I want to do what I'm about to do, I'm going to delete this. I did make a script that does it a backwards way, to where it'll actually copy everything to a backup folder, but I'm not going to use that. So I'm going to install the operating system later. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to hit 10p64. That's just the version I like to use when I'm testing. I'm not sure if there's any inherent reason not to. I mean, I could easily use the home or education versions if I wanted to. But anyway, since I'm basically targeting enterprise and corporations, they may want to see the professional. As far as the disk size, I'm going to go ahead with this number right here. Now, you might think to yourself, that's impossible, right? Like, that has to be impossible. You can't install Windows with that. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you most certainly can. With all the updates, with all the application, well, depending on what applications you're using. But I'm going to go ahead and give this a go. I have never gone this low before, but I know that the end result is less than that. So let's give it a shot. Processors, virtualize. I'm going to remove that. Don't need it. Oh, and you'll notice, yes, it's 2 gigabytes. That's really all you need. And remove the printer. Yeah, whatever. I need to change that to bridge mode. Okay. So this is happening on my laptop. I'm not currently on. Yeah, see, the server's in the background. And what I want to do is I want to have this in the background. So you'll be able to see how fast this process is, and we'll be able to monitor and remove that. Yes. There are other features in MDT that you can use. You can use a media. You can use you can actually create a flash drive with all of your stuff on it with MDT. But anyway, I'll refresh that, and let's go back into this. All right. So, play virtual machine. I am not totally against virtual machines. I just think that people are using them when they're entirely inefficient to use that way. For instance, like smart deploy. You're telling me that you would rather send this 12 gigabyte file that I'm about to send over your network to all of your target clients or your enterprise. You're basically multicasting a 12 gigabyte image or larger, which will only install one edition of Windows client or server. Or what you could do is you could make the process that builds those images, like I did, like this, which this Windows 10 file that I am showing you is 4.2 gigabytes. So you do the math. 6 editions available for 4.2 gigabytes with a little bit of time at the end needed to post-configure correctly, versus sending over a massive amount of data or extra amount of data, and then basically it's done after it gets transmitted. But I can tell you that this method right here will be faster every time. And the only reason I say that is because there's just a lot of math involved. But the simplest thing is that 12 is less, 4.2 is far less than 12. Anyway, as you can see, it's got today's date on all my images here. I did have the versions showing up, but for whatever reason, it's not doing that. So I'll fix that at some point, but not entirely relevant or important at this time. I'm just showcasing what this can do. I haven't really customized this much at all because the PowerShell delivery script is it's an entirely different method. And every time that I've tried to test with it, it has screwed up things on my network. So I have to basically use an isolated channel to be able to test it. I can't have it on the same deployment server that I use to service clients. Mainly because what it does is I'm not even gonna go there. They did release an update for it, so congratulations to Johan and Michael Nystrom and Michael Nyhaus for working diligently on that. I was actually rather upset that the project went unamended for about a couple of years, and I started asking questions about it in January. I'm not going to go into full details about what happened after that, but basically things are looking good now. There's a new version of Windows that I'm installing right now for you to see, and at some point I will be able to make this process work over the internet. That's sort of the end goal here, is that if your computer needs to have your applications migrated and you don't want to lose any of them, the one way you can do it now is just to use the media creation tool, which it may or it may not break your applications that were working. Microsoft is pretty good about making sure that their operating system doesn't mess with or screw up their client machines when they install the upgrades. However, they totally goofed up in the last update, the 1809 update, when it basically deleted users' profiles and stuff. Now, I can tell you that wasn't Microsoft's fault, and I know that it wasn't, but usually Microsoft is blamed for things that they didn't do. Sure, you might want to blame Microsoft when it pushes an update and then your computer doesn't boot afterward. But you know what? You really should be upset with you not maintaining the health of your hard drive or knowing that it's bad. So technically, it's basically both of their faults. It's Microsoft's and it's yours when that stuff happens. The problem is this. Windows doesn't do a good enough job of like checking the disk and making sure that it doesn't push an update like automatically, so that it puts you in that position where you have to go to a local computer shop to get your data back. But also, like, you know, these drive manufacturers don't include a tool that monitors the drive automatically. Like, you can do that if you know what I know and you use something like HD Tune or Crystal Disk, or even just basic Smart. When you turn on your computer and it bypasses the BIOS screen, it also bypasses the smart sensor readings. So there's a lot of conditions that aren't being told to people that just want things now. And I can understand that sentiment to a certain extent, but when you're patient and you allow people to do their job, good things can happen, and they often do. And what you see in this video is the end result of my struggle with learning to understand these things that I didn't previously quite understand. Like, I knew how to use these tools, but I found myself servicing clients that had something like Norton or McAfee installed on their machine, and it was totally up to date. And you know what? They still got scammed. Had a woman come in here less than a month ago. She came here. She had gotten hacked by some guy who was using a TeamViewer client, but the TeamViewer client wasn't his way in. What his way in was the tight VNC connection. So tight VNC, it's a community-driven pack. Well, actually, I think that one is costs money. But VNC is almost the same thing as RDP. So all it is basically a virtual network client, or a VPN, or remote desktop protocol. A lot of these protocols do the same things, but they just have different names. I feel like I am having deja vu for whatever reason. Well, look. The reason why this process is very important is because I could have easily just grabbed the USB disk and, you know, formatted her computer and then like started her off with basically none of her stuff. Or I could have developed a process that already includes all the tools that I would use without wasting my time trying to get to them. And you know, there's several ways that you can do this. You can use something like Chocolatey that has these tools available over the internet, but then you have to have access to the internet, and you basically have to make sure your router is connected and that you can access DNS and you can access DHCP and you can get an IP address, and that the cables aren't bad and that the switch isn't broken and that the Wi-Fi password is installed. Or you could do all this stuff locally with DHCP that automatically gives you an IP address when you set your network up correctly. And you can have a system that catalogs all the things that you would use. So for instance, let's say Active Directory is great because what it does is it allows you to put things into organizational units. But where it sucks is that it has to rely on 10 other services and tools to be able to accurately build that damn thing. So like if I want to configure an access point from Active Directory, well, you can't. You have to use SQL or some other database and then be able to provide a configuration script from there. So I am not looking to replace Active Directory because obviously that would be way more difficult than the things I've already done. But I am looking to provide a way for it to be automatically populated with a better configuration script. So for instance, like SQL and Active Directory have a lot of things in common. Active Directory and DNS have a lot of things in common. DHCP and DNS have some things in common. But where they all differ is that they have a different scope of service. So like DHCP will initially get you a network connection. DNS will initially allow you to ping host names and do a reverse PTR record lookup for anything on a local network or outside of your network. And then your gateway or whatever. All of that stuff is kind of littered in and out of DNS and DHCP. Where MDT and WDS are involved is you can actually automate WDS with basic Active Directory through group policies and through the sites and services panel. However, that method sucks. Why? Because you have to have a database first of all the fields that you would want to populate there, which is fine, but ASP can do all of that. PowerShell can do all of that. All of these things have a different scope of duties. But what I can tell you is that ASP.NET and PowerShell can actually do all the things that Active Directory and DHCP and DNS do, or at least it can configure them, and then the service will work like right out of the gate. And that's eventually the place that I would like to get to. So for instance, if I want to back up a whole bunch of data on a system, well, I could do that one of three ways. I could use Macrium. I could clone an entire hard drive to another point in a file system or a network file system. Or I could use PC Mover, which costs money as well, and a lot of times it will have problems afterward, which kind of sucks. You know, you pay somebody to sell you something that like sucks at working or doesn't work. That happens a lot, and that's kind of the point of frustration that I had gotten to in attempting to build this process, was that at some point I will reverse engineer, or at least recreate the functions of PC Mover, but it won't suck. The reason why is because it will actually vet all of the applications that are installed. It will look for the ones that are that the user uses most of the time, or is likely to want to have transferred, and it will have it will work in the same way where PC Mover, if you use that, it will tell you which applications will definitely transfer cleanly with a green color. It will tell you the ones that might be all right with a yellow color, and then it'll tell you the ones that they're pretty sure won't work afterward in red. The problem is this. That shouldn't be a thing. Like, that's pretty dumb, I think. And the reason I say that is because, look, I have a guy that I developed a server for who trades currency. Don't ask me how he does it. I've seen how he does it and the programming behind it, and it's pretty cool stuff. But when it comes to making sure that, or when it comes to like totally understanding how he's doing what he's doing, I don't really have a clue, even though I'm looking right at it. I had set him up with this machine, and initially I started with these VMs that were like 100 gigabytes because I didn't know how much space this program used. I had no idea at the time. I've since learned how it works, and I realized that it operates on basically these scripts that are like kilobytes in size. As you can see, the deployment completed successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this, run with PowerShell. I have been thinking about automating that part with like a task scheduler, but as you can see, it automatically elevated the script. And what I'm going to do next. All right, so this part here, I've left it there, even though I know how to disable that. I know how to keep that from popping up, but I'd rather keep it on there because less liability, I suppose. Yes. So you see this process here creates those files in the desktop, and then once it loads them, then it cleans them out. I forgot to stretch this window. That was the main reason why I scaled the screen like that. So, shows you the same, actually I don't know if this panel, yeah, this panel did show up before. This panel right here will tell you if you're basically deploying to the server that it's running from. As you can see, no, it's not. It tells you the host name, the architecture, the system drive, Windows root, system32, program data folder. And then it will also tell you where the bridge folders are. So basically that GUI template that I showed you, it uses the information that you feed it to look for these resource folders. And these are in my MDT share. You literally saw me copy and paste this folder. All of my resources and scripts, my tools like drivers and stuff, images, Windows images, the profiles, I'm not using that right now. Certificates, that I am using, but I'll get into that in a bit. And the applications, so like whatever applications you want to install, you don't have to use MDT to make a task sequence for that application anymore, because let's say you want to install an x86 or an x64 version, or let's say that it's a ubiquitous version and the x86 is actually an x22. I say x22 because I thought it was pretty dumb that they would have an x86 name for it and then an x64 name for it, when if it works with both, you could, like, you know, combine those numbers or subtract them, and if you subtract them you get 22. So I named the hybrid packages x22. But anyway, just a side point, as far as the local control, it will make that folder, which is your the first field in that GUI, and then it will populate these, and then when it's done using each one of these, it will actually remove it, which is kind of the point of keeping it real. So I'm going to go ahead and provision my certificates. It's going to automatically inject those. I'm going to go ahead and provision my virtualization template. I'm going to hit yes, VMware. So now it's going to install those files, and when it's done with them, we'll actually delete them, like where it's installing from. Because if you try to install this over the network, what happens is it will error out. So you have to pull those files locally to the machine. There are some programs that you can access over a network, but sometimes what happens is it'll execute on that machine instead of your machine, which is dumb, but you know, such is life. Some programs you need to have remain on a target machine rather than your current machine, and that's fine. But you know, there are some limitations with being able to access a program over a network. The driver installer that you'll see in a moment actually has a limitation where if you try to run it directly without using like a pop push directory, it will actually try to pull the indexes from the internet instead of from the machine that the executable is on. At some point I will go ahead and, you know, find a more efficient way to propagate that, and then my idea is that the drivers will actually be saved and copied to the local machine, so you could use them in the future. So at this point, now it's going to provision the branding. As you can see, that worked, because there's my logo. There's the phone number for the store, and there's my office number, and there's the computer name. And let's go ahead and just open up the I keep forgetting. I do have a template for Google Chrome to automatically open, but I didn't include it into the actual image. It's in the applications that play. But anyway, I'm just going to open it up with Edge so you can see that it is in fact going to the website that I put in. And boom, there it is. I am looking to update this. I am well aware that this resolution isn't showing properly, mainly because I made it so that when you like zoomed in and out, or like had this on a different device, or at least I was trying to make it that way, that it would resize the images. But the only reason I haven't fixed that is because I'm looking to develop a ASP.NET version of that, and then I'm going to totally revamp the site. But anyway, the phone number, yeah, okay. So as you can see, all that stuff is there. So that's good. That's good for you, for me, or whatever. I don't need drivers because the virtual template has already installed that, but I'll show you how that works. And I actually made it so that all of Snappy's rules are updated on the fly. So if you want to make changes to Snappy, you don't have to update the configuration file because the script does that. But anyway, that package can actually extract the drivers for your machine to the resources folder that I showed you, or at least the tools folder, or whatever folder you want it to be in, basically. So provision applications. You can use Chocolatey, you can skip it. Local will install my current applications template, but it's able to be easily amended. You could either go to each of these applications developers' websites like Google Chrome. You could go to Google, and then you could find the link to install the MSI application here, and then paste it, and then update the version info, which is basically what Chocolatey does. But Chocolatey has a bit of a limitation where it won't download or run space all of the downloads, which is a missed opportunity, I think, because all Chocolatey really does, if you have the community edition, it will process each file individually, like this is doing here. But I could also be run spacing the downloads of those applications, or putting them all into one package to redistribute. Chocolatey doesn't do this automatically because if you're a business, then you need to pay for a business license. And a lot of those applications that you might use, some of these applications that I use, all of them have a free version, but not all of them work in a corporate environment freely. For case in point, like I'm sure Malwarebytes wouldn't be too happy about that, and I'm sure Macrium, which I don't install on this, by the way, but I could. Macrium won't like that, and then also TeamViewer wouldn't like that either. You can use the free non-commercial versions. Oh, by the way, why didn't I do that already? So yeah, when it installed the VM package, it actually allowed me to expand the window. But anyway, as you can see, it's installing all of the applications that I have in my template. And I would go so far as to say that it's probably a lot less of a waste of time than trying to set up individual task sequences for driver packages and for applications packages and etc. and so forth. I'm not oblivious to the fact that some people might not like hearing or seeing some of the stuff in this video, But I can tell you that none of those people are actual consumers or people that are tired of wasting their time listening to systems engineers and network engineers and developers that say, oh, we need to validate or we need to pay for these packages or this, that, or the other thing. I'll tell you one thing. I'm not saying all system engineers are bad or waste people's time, but what I am saying is that there's a better way to validate the packages that you're installing. Simply put, if your enterprise is taking 3 months to validate one piece of software or push a Windows update, you're not dealing with experts. You're dealing with I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to add in. I'm not going to make fun of people that don't know how to do their job, but that's okay. Life is basically an evolving process, or a process where you evolve and learn as time goes by. I am an example of that. I am not the smartest person in the world, and I never said that I was, but I did build this process, and I did make it freely available because the tools that I use are all free. And I don't know. I mean, it was actually kind of fun building all this. If I need to make changes or updates, I don't have to tear apart my exe file. I can just edit a document with text files or the ISE, the PowerShell ISE script that you just saw me looking at, one or the other. Oh, okay. So I hit a limitation. It's on K-Lite, so go ahead and delete those. All right. Now I did have a method that would delete the application after it installed, but it was throwing errors during this part. So I mean, I still have to work on that, but it's negligible. All I did was just delete those other applications folders, and now it's working again. So this part right here, it's installing one Windows Update 890, 830, and then it's going to launch this stupid malicious software removal tool thing. I mean, it's not dumb. I mean, it's very helpful, but it's like, whatever, dude. I have other tools that do that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and hit check for updates. Not entirely sure why it's taking that long to say, oh, you're up to date. Okay, you're up to date. So now it gets to the part where it asks me to designate an account. If I want to migrate or create a user account, I can do that, or I can skip that. If I skip it, it won't disable the administrator deployment account, but if I create one, then it will pop up with a create user panel that I made, that I also made. Not entirely sure why it takes that long load, but that's okay. I'm going to make a user account named testing. Not going to tell you what password it is because it's pretty cool. I don't know. I mean, it's not that cool. All right, so now it's created the profile and it's imported the start layout, which I've modified. And then I'm going to hit migrate, and then it will create the user environment profile script and copy it to the desktop. It does say exception. I forgot to fix that, but it did put it there because you can see that. That's why I use robocopy, because then I can tell that some of my programming may need to be adjusted. But anyway, now that it's made a new administrator account, I can go ahead and I can say, yes, go ahead and remove the default administrator account. And now it's going to check for Windows activation, which this is not activated because I don't provide activation for production purposes. I do have licenses. I'm not going to waste them on this instance here because I'm pretty sure it creates a new digital signature each time a VM is spun up. Anyway, here's the information that you probably wanted to see. So version 10.0.18362.113, that is the most current up-to-date version of Windows there is, Windows 10. And I have all the versions of it, and I have basically all this information is just to confirm that what you saw was in fact true. It's not in a secure boot state, but you know, if you were using secure boot, it would have that on. It won't use secure boot on a VM unless you have Hyper-V or something like that, but it is using UEFI, so that's good. Let me go ahead and close that. And then because this process is pretty advanced, you don't actually have to reboot unless the driver installation tells you that you have to do that, or one of your applications. If you have an application that says you need to restart your computer, it's not a good application. It's 2019. If you install a piece of software and it says you need to reboot your machine, it's either accessing the kernel or it just sucks at life and you probably need a new one or an updated version. I realize, you know, I can be rather delightful with my words. So now that script is done. This whole script here is literally a text file. Well, it's a PS1 file disguised as a text file, but it did all of that. And then also, let's see, well, 432 megabytes free. Obviously, you don't want to push an image with like, you know, that little space left, but yeah, I mean, look, I installed all my applications here. Adobe Reader, I still have to get the updater tool to work properly. But yeah, I mean, 10.8 gigabytes, that's pretty good. I don't know anyone that would say that isn't rather impressive, Michael. That is rather good. Sure, I mean, I could go ahead and remove even more parts of the operating system, but then I won't have a ubiquitously deployable image for clients. But anyway, you go ahead and, so this start menu hasn't really changed much, but I'm going to go ahead and swap over to testing, the account that I just made. Now, it will still do the first login protocol here, but it doesn't set up OneDrive, and it doesn't set up a bunch of the Windows Store applications. They are all usually, some of that stuff is pulled from the internet, so like no matter how well you build the images, it's still going to pull more info from the internet, and it's going to turn things on like tracking that you can't actually disable. You can hit the tab that says track me and turn it off, but it doesn't fully disengage. They're still aggregating data on your machine if you use their software. I can't tell you exactly how they're doing it, but I know that it's being done through something like DCOM or CBS and things like that. But anyway, yeah, that only popped up because, I don't know, because VMware is silly like that. All right, but this is the end user's machine here. I don't know why that's not showing up. I don't want it open. Close it. Damn it. There we go. Okay, so I may have to update my my XML file that kind of like does the taskbar and the start menu. But as you can see, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Malwarebytes, Windows Security, Microsoft Store. If you want to use it, it's still there. TeamViewer, CCleaner, K-Lite, and 7-Zip. I need to get Adobe working again on here. It's not there. And then I also need to get that working. But those aren't big deals. I could just add them to the XML file, or update everything that needs to be updated doesn't even need to touch the script. That's basically what I'm getting at here, is that I can do the same things that MDT would do or SCCM do, but in a lot less time and with a lot less resources and with a lot less of a data footprint or bandwidth used or memory or processing power. That's basically the end result here. And at some point, once I get this part working again, this will fully import all of the user's previous stuff. So like their applications, their logins for like Google Chrome or whatever, and their pictures or their documents or whatever. All that stuff can be saved on the network, and it can also be saved in what's called a virtual archive. That's how Macrium saves backups. The backups actually have like they're not too different from like what 7-Zip would do, but they also contain like an executable so that it automatically mounts to a drive like a PS drive would. That's how all this software works. It all accesses deeper components of Windows itself, and then those companies, they focus on making the product better and making it evolve and everything and this, that, and the other thing. But anyway, that's my process over and out. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was a deep explanation that I wanted to share with people, and I hope you enjoyed what you watched. If you have any questions or comments or would like to use the script, the link is within the video description. Have a wonderful day. Take care.